read the text to let the text interpret you. And in the Benedictines, one who really kind of made it real and come alive. And so it's reading through a text 4 times, slowly with questions involved. And then the second week that I did on reading was a practice known as Ignatian imaginative contemplation from a guy named Ignatius of Loyola, who started the Jesuit Society, or the Jesus Society. And Ignatius's method of reading was put yourself in the text. Take a position in the text. And if there's multiple things going on in the text, read it through from a different perspective. So the exercise that I did with on the video, and these videos are on my YouTube channel. Just search Gregory Neal and you can find it. And there's a playlist of spiritual formation if you want to see more about them. But so with what Ignatius does is put yourself in the text. We read through Genesis 3. So you got Adam, Eve, God, the serpent, even an inanimate object, the fruit. And every time you read it from a different perspective and begin to ask some questions, right? Where's God in this story? Where am I in this story? What's God calling us to do? What's God trying to teach us? You also appeal to the senses. What do you taste, hear, smell when you read the story? So that's Ignatian contemplation. And then I did another one, a study known as the Lambeth method, or the African Bible study method. Again, it's multiple times of reading through different translations, and then a series of questions that you ask yourself, and they all end kind of even Lectio Divina, which is the Benedictine style, and this, they all end with the question, is what's God really calling you to do, and who's God calling you to be? And the whole idea of sacred reading of the text is to let the text interpret you. Instead of you trying to figure out, and none of those, by the way, are you trying to do stuff to try to figure out what it means, the technical aspects of that. You're trying to let the text interpret you. How's the text shaping and molding you? And so or forming you. And so then I did a couple of weeks of what I call contemplative disciplines, which is where we're going to start. So 2 weeks ago, I did this exercise called Examen, and the whole purpose, it looks like it's examine, but Examen, the whole purpose of that is to open yourself up to God, to make yourself aware of the presence of God through a series of exercises. So the Examen is what you do is you literally examine your day. You start with a prayer, maybe a text, and you just go through your day and ask yourself a series of questions. How did I encounter God today? How was God's love demonstrated to me today? How was it given to me? How did I give it away? How did I show it? And so you can do that like twice a day, maybe once at noon or once in the evening. I prefer the evening. Again, the Examen comes from Ignatius, and it's just about, hey, where do God and I intersect throughout the day? Is it mowing the yard, on the job, driving around, looking, in my boat on the lake, or is it camping? Those kind of, you guys just went on camping trips, so you'd go back and look and reflect. So that's the Examen. And then we looked last week at an exercise called Practicing the Presence. It's a great little work written by a guy named Brother Lawrence. It's available online for free. It's in a PDF. So Brother Lawrence was not a monk to begin with. He was a soldier. He wasn't a very good one. But he was a lifer, and he got injured, and he got out of the army. He was from France, and he wanted to be a monk, and he just didn't have it. He didn't have the stuff, right? So he worked at the monastery in the kitchen mostly his whole life after the army. So he had an experience with God and just knew that. And so what Brother Lawrence did in practicing the presence was this intentional awareness. We know that God is omnipresent, right? God is everywhere all the time. Well, so what? What's that mean? How do I put some flesh on that? And so what the idea of practicing the presence, it's a little more active than like the Examen is just thought, maybe some journaling. So he was working in the kitchen. Here's a great story of Brother Lawrence in practicing the presence. He realized that this is a call of God. It's important. So he's cooking for the monks in the monastery. And he's cooking potatoes, and he begins to peel them. And he thought, you know what? This is for God, ultimately. And then how is it that I can manifest what this call to peel potatoes and help the monks and give glory to God? And so as he peeled the potatoes, he would peel it and go, this one is for my brother Curtis. This one is for this is for my sister Lacey. And he would just go through and he would pray for them and want the best for them. And what he began to realize is when he dedicated every activity that he did, as mundane as washing dishes or peeling potatoes, to the glory of God, he recognized how powerful and present God was in his life, in everything that we do. And so he really put some flesh on, hey, we believe God's omnipresent. He put some teeth in it. And so one of the things you can do if you're going to practice that discipline is whatever you're doing, the first thing you do is pray about it before you do it. It doesn't matter, playing golf or mowing the yard or washing dishes or working or studying or seeing patients at the clinic or getting your kids ready for bed or whatever it is. I'm going to do this to the glory of God. So pray that God will be glorified in your action, and then begin to reflect, how is this exemplifying God to others? How's this helping others? And then when it's done, give thanks to God for the opportunity, and then sit down and reflect a little bit. Okay, what just happened here? I got my kids ready for bed. I've done it 1,000 times. Where was God in all that? Because God is in all that, right? God's blessed you with children. Sometimes we say God has cursed us with children, and most of the time we say God's blessed us with children. And so that's the idea of contemplative disciplines. And so I've got about 6 more of contemplative disciplines that I want to go through. We only got through one of them Monday at nut lunch. So we're just going to do one tonight. And then whatever pace that Monday gives us. And so I'll introduce the discipline to you. We'll talk about it some. How, kind of some nuts and bolts and how to, and maybe we'll look at some text that go with it. There's a book I would recommend if you want to get a book about spiritual practices. It's written by Adele Calhoun, Adele and Calhoun. It is called The Spiritual Disciplines Handbook. And she breaks down the disciplines in a lot of different ways, and I'm relying pretty heavy on her book. It's a great book, and the thing about the spiritual practices or the disciplines is you find what works for you. So I'll give you one. I got drawn to contemplative disciplines, these kind where you got to sit still. Sitting still is not something that is part of my nature. I'm busy. Right? I'm active, I'm kinetic, got to be moving. You can see that when I preach. I can't stand up behind the podium, right? Energy, it needs to go somewhere. So when I started the doctoral program at ACU, we had to do a profile, test, a personality test called the Grip Berkman. And he formed this triangle over these 4 quadrants and kind of where you are. I was so out of whack on the kinetic side, the busy side, nothing on the contemplative side, hardly at all. Right? So the director of the DMIN program, Carson Reed, said, man, I've really never seen anything like this before. So we began to think about what do I need to do to balance that out? And what I needed, so I always found the presence of God in doing, in serving. That's what my daughter would tell you. My love language is doing for others. But to be able to be still and be disciplined enough to be still and recognize the presence of God and how God dwells in me was really important. So that's kind of contemplative disciplines. That's how I got into them, and which is not my nature, right? It's something that's foreign to me. What's that? You may grow out of that. Yeah, you're right. So as I get older, I think I will, Jim. So I have to be intentional about meditating and being and contemplating on things. I don't have to be intentional about action. It comes naturally to me. So, everybody kind of okay with that? I see where we're coming from. That's really quick. No charge to watch the videos, right? Just, search YouTube Gregory Neal and you'll find them if you want to get caught up. They're anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes a piece, and sometimes they're engaging and sometimes they're not. So, not like me. So here, the discipline tonight is this, and this one's got a little more activity to it than journaling, and you can be busy in this one in some way, but it is contemplative, and it's the discipline of simplicity. And here's my little subtitle for the discipline of simplicity: is how do you find the one thing in the busyness of your day or in the chaos of your life that really matters? Okay. And so I'm going to read a text. I'm going to read it a couple times from a couple of translations, and then we'll do a minute or so of silence in between the readings. And I don't want you to just get too tied up in everything. I want you to put yourself in this text. And so it's the Mary Martha text when Jesus is at their house. Either be Mary or Martha or Jesus, and just try to just imagine and picture what's going on in the narrative. It's a short reading, and then we'll talk about the simplicity factor of the Mary Martha. So this is from Luke 10, 38 through 42. You don't have to read along, just listen. Okay. Let me give you one little tip about Scripture. Whether you're studying by yourself or studying with somebody else, read the text out loud, even to yourself. And it's really good because, like me, when I'm studying by myself, I talk to myself and I ask myself questions and I answer myself, which does make me crazy. I heard if you don't... What's that?
And the smartest person.
Yes, I am always the smartest person in the room when I do that. I always heard if you didn't answer yourself, you weren't crazy. Well, I answer myself. So this is Luke 10, beginning in verse 38. Now, as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And she went up to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. And Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her." Just take a minute, reflect. All right, I'll read it again. Now, as they went on their way, he entered a certain village, where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. She came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. And Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. Can I invite you into some silence for just a minute? All right, let's talk about the story for a minute, the narrative. Just what's going on, what's happening there, how's that relate to what happened today? How's that look like your house? What's a common experience that you've had in something like that? And then we'll get to the discipline itself. So.
All these things to do and stuff to do in order to take care of others. And growing up, I remember talking about this like scripture stuff with my parents and things because it's like she's trying to help everyone, trying to do everything and stuff, but that that even good tasks and things can interfere, get in the way of what's most important.
So, when's the last time you went to bed and everything that you wanted to do was done? Jim, now you may be the exception. One, because you're like Superman, and
I usually have 4 or 5 things that I
right.
didn't quite finish up.
I'm thinking it was like 49 years ago.
Right. I mean, isn't it interesting? And I think Curtis makes a great point. There's always something to do. Right? The most frustrating thing I can tell you about 25 years of doing this is I have never, ever finished anything. I've never finished. Right? I never said, whew, that's it. I'm like Martha. Right? I am anxious with much serving. One more phone call to make. One more email to answer. One more run at that text. Right? One more phone system to replace. Whatever it is. Right? I think you can just see from this account that sometimes the best thing to do, this is going to sound really interesting, the best thing to do is to do nothing, but be present with Jesus. So, what Jesus tells Martha, she found that one thing. She found it. It was a good thing. It's not what Martha did wasn't important. It was important. Hospitality is huge in that world. It is super important.
But it wasn't the better part.
It wasn't the better part, right? It wasn't the one thing. And so simplicity, if I can borrow the title of a book that was written years ago, the idea of simplicity is how to live like Mary in a Martha world. Right? And so the goal of simplicity, and so one thing, if you get Calhoun's book, the goal, it'll tell you what the goal is and what the discipline is and a definition, some suggested text to read, then some activities to do, which we'll look at. So the goal of simplicity is this. It's about untangling in simplifying your life or your day or that hour to focus on what really matters most. What's really important? So, can I use for you guys that got young kids, you families out here that have young kids, is that bedtime, hitting that bedtime, the most important thing always? How many fights have you had with your kid about 8 o'clock is 8 o'clock or whatever the time is, right? Sometimes it's just better to be with them. Listen, I know you're going to have to pay for it tomorrow, right? We know that. So it's the idea of really, can I just simplify the chaos or the conflict or the busyness in this context, in this moment, whatever that looks like, and figure out what's really important here. And where does God fit into that? Does that make sense? And so what simplicity is really learning the art of letting go of the things that aren't important, and then giving and attending to the things that are. One of the great side effects, if you will, of simplicity is generosity. It's learning how to give. And how to receive and give, and the reciprocity of giving and receiving. If you find yourself, by the way, always being a giver or always being a taker, you're missing the blessing of giving. It's reciprocal. So, other thoughts about the text, and I'll get into some practical things that we can do in simplicity, or just about the whole concept of in the Mary Martha. We give Martha a hard time, and we shouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I think Martha had the one thing right at the edge of town, where she met him and said, "Hey, come to my house."
Right.
And that was the important thing that needed to be. That was it right then.
Mm-hmm.
And then got distracted, just like the text says, with all the other stuff that needed to be done.
Yeah. And got really anxious about it, right? So, when you have people over, what do? Right? Gotta get clean, checking on this, we're checking on that, we're making sure the food's out. Listen, we're all Marthas when we're in hospitality mode, right? And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think what stood out to me was shows. Like, I don't know why, but when you were reading, shows was the word that just like really stuck with me. And I think that's because sometimes we're consciously choosing and sometimes we're not. But when you're talking about like what you're talking about with simplicity, it's like sometimes we're making those decisions or sometimes we're choosing things, but we're not actually even like consciously doing it. So bringing like a conscious awareness around choosing or what you're choosing to do, or maybe like the hierarchy in which you're choosing to do things and that kind of thing. That's kind of what was standing out to me.
Yeah. So she has to be intentional about this. She knows. It's not like she doesn't see her sister scurrying around and probably rolling her eyes or giving her that kind of, nonverbal, verbal stuff. She knows. She knows the expectations. When you're the host or the hostess, there's a cultural expectation. She knows. Yet she chooses, right? I think that's a great pickup on that text. She chooses to be intentional about the one thing. So, that's the goal, right? Simplicity. What's important? Find the one thing. So, I'll give you some exercises, different things to practice. Then we can talk about these. So 1, simplify your talk. How many useless words do you speak in a day? And what I mean by useless is derogatory, defamatory, empty, no purpose behind them, just chattering, right? Or attacking, or or they're kind of passive-aggressive words. They're full of ambiguity and half-truth and spin doctoring. I love to spin the narrative, right? I want to control the narrative that's going on. So here's what I would suggest, and this is from Calhoun's book too, is kind of notice how you talk near and out throughout the day. I'm big on journaling, or if if you're electronic, I'm a pen and paper person, but if you use electronic notepad, just notice repeated words that are kind of empty, or they're sarcastic, or they don't serve any benefit. They're just words that you use. Cut them out of your vocabulary. So here's a word that I just used it. I learned to learn how to cut out when I started writing papers. So we have to follow papers that we turn in now have to follow the guidelines of Society of Biblical Literature. How do you format those things? And the writing lab at ACU wanted us to look and see how often we use the word that when we write. It's an unnecessary word most of the time. If you don't have to use it, don't use it. My paper is shrunk in half, right? I like to use that.
It's a meaning all the time.
So it does, right? That's what they said. If you don't need it, don't use it. So the idea of simplifying talk is to find words that don't add richness to the conversation or that don't clarify. So when that clarifies, absolutely use it. When it doesn't, it's amazing. What I had to do is record myself and then go back and listen. It's nutty, the things that I say. So that's one. That's harder to do, but you can do it. All right, here's another one. Cleaning out. Do you know who Jim Hatmaker is? So Jim Hatmaker and her husband were part of a church movement in Austin. They're the Barefoot Church, right? I think. Well, she put a book out, and I can't remember the exact title of it, but it was about this. It was about simplifying.
I think that was the name of it.
Seven, wasn't it? Right. To go in your closet, 7 outfits, the 7 pair of shoes that you get, whatever it was, right? And just to look and see what you had. Take inventory of your stuff. Now, and look at that. And how much do you use it? And cut it down. And so maybe 1 or 2 areas of your life that need some cleaning out. The closet's an easy place to start. But don't just go and clean out your closet. Okay, that's part of it. But I think part of the thing that we do in cleaning out is throw away what has no use anymore. Okay. Give away what does. Don't necessarily sell it. So part of the side benefit of simplicity is generosity. But reflect on all of it. So I'll tell a great example with my in-laws. So when my father-in-law had his surgery and was going to be in a wheelchair and going through rehab, their house was not conducive for them to live there anymore. And so as we moved them into an assisted living place, we were going to get their house ready to sell. And we had to do some simplicity, right? We had to let go. And at first we got a little irritated with my mother-in-law, then I learned to appreciate it. She really reflected on everything. This pot came from Aunt so-and-so. And we talked about it. Or she talked about it. Mostly we listened. This skirt came from. That Bible was. That book was a gift. We bought that for Chris when she was this age. And begin to go through and reflect on all that. And she's having to simplify from, a 2,600 square foot house to a 600 square foot apartment. But what she did that was so profound and stuck in my head that I finally went, oh, is reflection. And then at the bottom of that, how did God fit into all those stories? What was life-giving about those things? What was faith-building? Or maybe what was the struggle about those things? But as you go through this simplicity and going through the clean out or the let go, don't just do what I like to do because I'm pragmatic and I believe in the God of efficiency. Back up the roll-off dumpster and let's go. Just start throwing. And then one day you go, I wonder where that was. So, but the big piece of the simplifying is not just getting rid of stuff. It's giving it away and then reflecting on it. And then going back to, okay, in this reflection, where's God fit into this stuff? Right? And that can be, it doesn't just have to be stuff. Right? That can be ideas. That can be philosophies. A lot of things that we can let go of and clean out. Especially if they're competing.
Just think about guilt and
Right. So,
baggage from growing up.
You never want someone else to do your cleaning out for you, though, I'll tell you that.
that's right.
They're gonna throw away things that you can't do
Yeah.
without.
Yeah, and plus you don't get to reflect on those either. You don't get to go through the process.
I made a mistake, let my two daughters clean out a couple of cars into my house. I was always, well, what happened to that?
Right.
Things I was thinking.
Yeah, and part of what, and part of the, I mean, we did sell some things, but part of the stuff that we gave away, it was really important to my mother-in-law who got that. Right. There was relationship there. And so this idea of cleaning out is another exercise of simplicity. All right, now I'm going to pick on you a little bit more. Start saying no. It's the most powerful word in the English language in our society right now is no. You know why it's powerful? Because we can't say it. It's hard for us to say it. Now, you've been retired for a while.
I missed what you said.
About saying no to things. To looking at our calendar, right? Look at your schedule over the next 2 weeks. I looked at mine this week and I thought, oh, I should have said no to that because I forgot about a couple of things that aren't in my normal routine. And so I overbooked. And when you overbook, something gets left out. Guess who got left out this week? That woman that I said I do to, and that kid that I helped procreate. I hadn't been home. Left the house every morning before 6 and hadn't got home till after it'd be 8 o'clock. And just because I didn't reflect, right, to look at my calendar. And there were good things, by the way. Nothing that I said yes to were all good things. And say no. So look at your calendar. See if you can cancel an appointment. There's one I'd like to cancel next Monday because I have to go see my doctor and he is not going to be happy with me. I can tell you that. I'm going to give you a heads up.
Because it's glaring at you right now.
Yeah, he's probably already got the results of my blood work. One, I forgot about doing my blood work. Luckily, I got that worked out. But can you look and see, okay, but again, the one thing, what's the most important thing? They're all important to us or we wouldn't schedule them. Right? What's the thing? When I was in business, it was hard for me to turn contracts down. even when I didn't have time to do them. And when I said yes, then something else suffered when I had too much going on. Busyness, by the way, is not a telltale sign of righteousness, even when it's busy in kingdom work. It's not. I would say this, if you're going to open up your calendar, you're going to cancel an appointment, you're going to say no, couple this with another discipline. Simplicity usually works better with other disciplines. Meditation, reflection, rest. The most neglected discipline that I have in my life is Sabbath. I used to say with pride, we can rest when we die. I regret saying that now. Because if you don't rest, you won't live as long as Jim Hearn does. Right? And you won't enjoy life.
I'm very fortunate
Right.
to have friends like you guys.
Yeah. And maybe couple it with prayer. So that's a good thing with opening up your calendar in the simplicity is to add intentional time of prayer. That space, take part of that space and pray more. And maybe pray very specifically about that. And it's okay. It is okay to say no. You know what? Jesus didn't heal everybody that was sick. Jesus didn't feed everybody that was hungry. Jesus didn't raise everybody that died. There were things that were important when he did those things. So, one more thing on simplicity, and then we'll wrap it up and let you guys chime in. There may be some more. There's others. If you can do it, walk somewhere instead of driving. My daughter lived in New York for a year. She loved living in New York because she didn't have to drive anywhere. That walk time was great for her. I mean, she did some subways too, but she loved to walk the streets of New York and Brooklyn when she lived there. And she still does that. She walks more for exercise and recreation instead of just functionality. But if you're physically able, walk somewhere to your neighbor's house. There was a guy that came here a couple of Fridays ago. I was here by myself. I was waiting on. Our phone system crashed, our phone server, and the guy from Austin was coming out to change it. And so in the meantime, I bought 3 of those cheap cordless phones to stick around the office. And we have a rule. So we close the office on Friday. I tell my fellow ministers, do not answer the phone on Friday. You'll regret it. Do not answer the phone on Friday. But I got a guy coming who's supposed to give me a 20-minute heads up to make sure that I'm here. He's got my cell phone and he's got the office phone. He's got an Austin number. So the phone rings. I look. It's an Austin number. I answer it. It's not him. And I get a question. Do you guys help homeless people with food? Okay. He said, well, I'm living in my car. I'm up at parking lot by Motel 6. I'll be there in a little bit. Okay, we'll get you fixed up. So, in the meantime, phone guy gets here and he calls and says, I am so sorry. It was a big storm that hit in Austin that day. One of my biggest customers just got hit by lightning. All their phones are out. I got to go. I can't fix you today. He leaves. So now I'm waiting on this gentleman who called about food. And I wait, and I wait, and I wait. Like, man, an hour and a half later, he shows up. Out of breath. Hey, did you call early about food? Yeah. Okay, well, I got it right here. Stuff you can, eat in your car, and crackers and peanut butter and bread and sandwiches and stuff. So he goes, "Can I sit down?" "Yeah, got some water." A little bit about what's going on in his life. And he goes, "I need to ask a favor. I know you've done a lot. You think you could drive me back to my car?" And I thought, "Oh, did it break down?" "No, I just decided to walk." He said, "I needed to clear my head, think a little bit." He walked from Motel 6. And I thought, man, I wonder if I walked. So, so even today, I should have walked. I went and gave blood right across the street. I drove across the parking lot. I needed to walk, think about, but I was busy because I had to go from there, and I had an appointment right after that, and then I had another one right after that, and I had to be 3 places in about an hour, and I didn't think about God one time in that hour. I'm knowing I was going to teach this tonight. And so if you can do that, don't just walk for the exercise, but walk for the time to spend with God. And look around. Where was God? How is God speaking to you? What is God calling you into? How do you see God in this, out of your car? Because see, look, when you're driving a car, you know how many things you're doing? You know how it is. If you really drive defensively, whatever that means. I always say I drive aggressively defensively. If you can do that? But how many things you're trying to do at the same time? Checking the mirrors, fiddling with the phone, air conditioners, radios. It's just constant. When you walk, you can kind of take it all in. So, we live on a golf course. I've really learned to appreciate to walk those 9 holes, or 18, whatever we're playing that day. And a lot of times Mason and I go out late in the evening. It's just nice to walk. Conversations are better.
Even up when you're old.
Yeah. And it just makes golf more enjoyable. And there's time to reflect. And you notice things and you see things when simplicity is part of your intentional walk with God. So, there's others that we could talk about. It's probably enough. Thoughts that you have on simplicity or about the Mary Martha text that you want to share with this discipline. The big part of it is be intentional, but also be reflective as you simplify.
I think there's a piece that comes with simplicity that helps you be more reflectful. Is that a word? Reflective.
Reflective, yeah.
It brings Lisa a lot of peace to come home to a clean house after we've been on a trip. That's simple for her. There's not a whole list of things that needs to be done when we get home from a trip. Those kinds of things that frees up time with a little bit of planning, and you have time to reflect on. We just spent a great weekend and really had an encouraging worship time to be able to reflect on that 4 or 5 hours later when you get home, because the house was ready for you.
I thought about you guys on Sunday. I knew that there was a group of you camping, and as I'm up here fiddling with all the parts, right? Sound system, camera, lights, ACs, microphones, right? All those things that that the magic fairies do to make sure that worship happens. And then I'm thinking, okay, I know the Braves are gone today. I'm not sure he's doing sound, so I need to get a couple things already put in place. And then I thought, well, I'll just go grab the communion, because Kent Carrot comes and opens up the building and puts communion out and puts the bulletins in the chairs. And I go back to get the communion, and we had run out of those cups. And so Kathy Gay has been so gracious. Ever since COVID hit, she's done communion every week. Just a true servant. And I ordered them, but I didn't get them up here. And so until after, I didn't even check to see if they just brought them up. And so I get here, and it's about half enough. Right? And now my whole routine is shot. And
And the Braves aren't getting here.
and I thought about worship, because I knew I was doing simplicity this week, and I know these things are important and good. The live streaming has a benefit. The sound system, especially for those that don't hear as well, is really important. Those who are visual learners, the PowerPoints are needed. But so I'm going to propose at some point, I don't know when, that we'll have a simple worship day one day.
Everybody can bring their camp chairs.
Yeah. Because that's what y'all did, right? You just sat around and worshiped God without all the potential distractions that were going on. Those are good things to do. To be in. And that's, again, I think you can even take this idea, this discipline of simplicity to that level. And sometimes when I'm here on Sunday, even going through that, if I can get my head settled enough, I do that while I'm sitting in the chairs. What's the one thing today that is really important, where I can recognize the presence of God and the power of God and the peace of God? And usually it has to do with table. I can do that at table. I'm done preaching and shut my brain off, which some of you think I've shut my brain off before I start, but to be intentional about that. It's a really good discipline. It's a hard discipline for us, especially when it comes to our time and our stuff. And go into practice.
You think Jesus would have rebuked Martha if she hadn't said anything, if she had just selflessly served so that Mary could sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to Jesus, and she was content with that?
Yeah, I think he would have recognized that she found her one thing that day.
Right.
The one thing that was most important. I think it was her, hey, tell her to help me thing. That's what caused his remarks back. It's okay sometimes. Because what we say when we choose the discipline of simplicity is we choose to be evaluated by God, not by cultural expectations.
Talking about the contemplative and walking, think back how many, when have any of your aha moments come? And what were you doing? For me, I think it was numerous times when I had this epiphany of something, and it's while I'm mowing the grass, while I'm on a run, or walk. And you think there's something about that, about the way God designed us, that doing something like walking or light physical activity, I was in a leadership class, and I had interviewed with the creator of the movie Inside Out, the Disney movie Inside Out. And they had this, he and the story writers were having this hard time because they had the basic concepts down, but they were wrestling on getting that deepness to the story. And they had the main character was joy and everything, and everything's going through. And finally, he went for a walk in the woods, and he had his phone videoing him as he's walking, because he's talking to himself, trying to think about this thing as he's going through it. And then you see his pace slow. And he goes from walking briskly to where he can barely talk at the same time. And his pace slows, and that's when he realized the people that he has the deepest connection with in life are not just the people that he laughed and that he had fun with, but it's the people he hurt with, it's the people he cried with. That's where he had that epiphany of realizing it's not just about the joy. The deep relationships are when you have suffering and when you have sadness. And that's when they came up with the idea of introducing the sadness character in the movie, and it's that marriage between joy and sadness that adds the depth to the entire movie. It makes it so great. But it was while on a walk that he came to that. And it was just this talk about, that's where if you're facing struggles and things, that's what a lot of times you do is go for a walk to think, reflect, pray while you're walking.
Yeah, and that's in that attempt to find the one thing, right? To find the thing. So, great. It's good. All right, anything else? Try to keep these things to an hour-ish. So, the plan next week is we'll do one or two more. We'll see what the Monday lunch crowd decides for you guys, and I'll bring the Calhoun book, and so we'll go through. I know a couple of them we'll do. A couple of weeks we'll get through 2 or 3 of them, but we're gonna take our time on these and just reflect on them. And then after we get through with these contemplative disciplines, we'll do prayer disciplines. So we'll do different forms of different ways of being more intentional about prayer. And one of those things will be, observing hours and set hours of prayer. And we'll do we'll do some of those together as we go through the exercises. Okay? Everybody good? We'll go in peace and love God. Serve God and serve God's children.